Like the last few years before it, 2019 was an absolute dumpster fire. And only a few weeks in, 2020 has already proven to be an even bigger one. So to help try and take our minds off it for just a little bit, I want to talk about some of the cool stuff that came out of the last few months with my top things of winter 2019. Starting with Camino is a crime thriller directed by Vince Gilligan and co-produced by Sony Pictures Television, Grand Via Productions, and Highbridge Productions that follows Jesse Pinkman, one of the main characters of the critically acclaimed hit Breaking Bad, shortly after the events of its series finale, as he dodges around cops and crooks alike to escape this turbulent life of crime once and for all. It's a nice return to the world of Breaking Bad and what I think made it so captivating in the first place. For as much as I love Better Call Saul, it presents its world in a much different light, generally putting a cynically satiric spin on its criminally charged setting. And for as well as that works, it is quite a tonal departure from what Breaking Bad established. Meanwhile, El Camino practically buries itself in the neo-western grit that defined the original series, filling itself with tense drama, action, and on-the-nose showdowns made all the more nerve-wracking by cleverly crafted visuals and fantastic performances. Though for as much as I enjoyed it, I'm also painfully aware of how unnecessary it can be at times. At least from what I remember, there weren't too many loose ends left by Breaking Bad's season finale to explore, and so a lot of this film's narrative feels like it's giving itself more of an ending just because. It expands on things that don't feel like they need to be given that much depth. But at the same time, I think the extra detail it does provide do make it worthwhile. Particularly in exploring the depths of cruelty the people Jesse got involved with, voluntarily or not, can reach. Not from the perspective of the person causing that pain, but from the perspective of those they hurt, and the toll that damage takes. And as well, there is something quite nice about a franchise so focused on people embracing the worst parts of themselves, stumbling into their own downfall, instead telling a story about someone who's made every mistake imaginable, getting a chance to move past them. There's a self-reflective quality to the film that I find deeply fascinating to watch it work through. El Camino ends the Breaking Bad series on a more technically and thematically conclusive note, though suffice it to say, your mileage may vary. Marriage Story is a drama film directed by Noah Baumbach and produced by Heyday Films, about the strained marital relationship between a theater director, Charlie, and an actress, Nicole, as they slowly make their way through an increasingly messy divorce. It's hard to describe this film as anything other than painful. It highlights the bitter reality that this kind of experience brings, acknowledging the difficulty of untangling lives that have become so deeply intertwined both professionally and personally.
You can't be friends with him anymore.
Charlie and I have our own relationship, independent of your marriage, just like I'm still friends with Cassie's ex, Jeff.
Are you still seeing Jeff?
Their respective desire to get custody over their child twists into a game of one-upmanship for his affection that only further drives a wedge between them. The legal process they go through only exacerbates that mean streak, as their lawyers either go behind their back to do shit they didn't ask for just for the sake of getting an edge on the case, or scaring them into believing that their entire life is about to fall apart.
It's very hard to convince the courts to move a kid. As soon as you let your wife and child leave New York, you made life very difficult for yourself.
But what I think makes it hurt most of all is seeing its central characters struggle to come to terms with the core idea its narrative tries to hit home. That though they may love each other, they're both looking for very different things out of life that just aren't going to work together, and that maybe they are better apart. But in refusing to fully accept it, they push themselves and their relationship to a breaking point.
You're fucking insane! And you're fucking winning!
It lingers on the uncomfortable and often nasty details of this kind of situation, and it's made all the more impactful by the film's characterization, especially of its main duo, who are written in such a way that I can so earnestly empathize with each of them, but I'm constantly and infinitely infuriated by them simultaneously, and whose respective emotional turmoil is brought to life by strong performances from Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson respectively. There's something so tragically raw about Marriage Story that makes it an unforgettable experience. Little Women is a period drama directed by Greta Gerwig, co-produced by Columbia Pictures, Regency Enterprises, and Pascal Pictures, and based on the book of the same name by Louisa May Alcott, set in Civil War America as the March sisters, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, transition from youth to adulthood, and the harrowing experiences it brings for each of them. And I'll be honest, I didn't expect to enjoy this film as much as I did, but it ended up growing on me in ways I never would have expected. As someone from a family of 4 kids myself, albeit with a different composition, its story of the relationships between these 4 siblings struck a chord with me. From the in-jokes and banter to the bickering and blood-boiling arguments, there's so much about their interactions and chemistry that feel true to life, and in some cases are oddly familiar, whether it be in seeing the ways their varying personalities and perspectives clash, or being able to relate just a little too strongly to their respective individual struggles.
You will always be a critic and never an author, and the world will forget that you ever even lived.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
Its characters and their relationships are quite relatable for me, and it's all captured with some fantastic cinematography. There's something oddly picturesque about its direction, presenting every scene in such a way that reminds me of old-fashioned paintings, and making strong use of light and color contrast to emphasize the atmosphere of every moment, from the warm hues of youth to the cold tones of adulthood. It does its best to frame every vignette of the March sisters' lives like a picture to hang on the wall for years to come. It's a fitting detail since, to me at least, that's what the film is all about. Its characters go through so much as time passes them by. The hardships of a world riddled with war and disease that looks down on them for not being born into the right family or with the right parts, slowly dawning on them as they grow older. It's a heavy burden to bear, and one that's only made easier by the memories they're able to cherish, and the hopes of the ones they still have yet to make. Little Women is defined by and all about the little moments that make life worth living. KLAUS is an animated Christmas movie directed by Sergio Pablos and co-produced by Sergio Pablos Animation Studios and Aniventure about Jesper, the lazy heir to a postal empire sent by his father to Smearensburg. A run-down old town deep in the snowy wilds, violently split between 2 familial factions, and tasked with delivering 6,000 letters in a year. While initially struggling to drum up any business, he runs into a fearsome man in the woods with a knack for making toys who presents a unique solution to his situation. I know Christmas is long come and gone at this point, but I feel like it'd be weird not to at least mention this film, because it is an absolute joy to watch, and in one sense I mean that quite literally. It's more traditional 2D animated film, full of the kind of exaggerated designs, expressive movements, and super fluid motion that used to define the animation world. But more interestingly, it doesn't rely on 2D alone, as it also makes handy use of many 3D elements to craft its world. In a way, it's almost like a reverse Spider-Verse, borrowing elements from other forms of animation to make its style stand out that much more. The art and animation alone make it worth a watch, if for nothing else than being able to see that old school approach find its place in modern day. That same sentiment can also be seen in its story. It is admittedly a lot of the standard stuff you'd expect from a Christmas movie. Snowy setting, big bearded man giving gifts to kids, a self-centered character learning to be altruistic, etc. But it has a lot of fun in playing around with those old tropes and ideas surrounding the holiday, and more specifically, the iconic man in red who embodies it for most people, to make a narrative full of moments both lighthearted and heavy that, though familiar, feel pleasantly fresh, even if some of them are hard to sit true. God, who the fuck thought a pop music montage was a good idea? KLAUS celebrates and reinvents the old school ideas and beloved traditions it builds itself around. Vinland Saga is an anime series directed by Shuhei Yabuta, produced by Wit Studio, and based on the manga of the same name by Makoto Yukimura, set in 11th century England, and which follows Thorfinn, the son of a legendary warrior, fighting alongside a band of elite Vikings whose commander, Askeladd, ordered his father's death, in the hopes of getting revenge, whilst they both get deeply embroiled in the royal politics of the Danish monarchy and its potential successor. And I think I can safely say this series is one of my favourite shows, animated or otherwise, of 2019. Acting as a loose fictionalization of Canute the Great's rise to power, with elements drawn from the Vinland sagas, its historical setting is filled with a rich amount of detail, from the environments to the weapons to the clothes to even the mentalities and religious views that ground it in this medieval era, while still giving its Nordic-inspired drama a nice splash of good old-fashioned anime bullshit where it can to make its characters and world feel larger than life. The characters themselves are nuanced and complex, riddled with compelling goals and tragic backstories that immediately hooked me into their journeys across this war-stricken world, but which often leaves me with complicated feelings about how I should feel about them, especially Askeladd. Honestly, I could probably, and do hope to at some point, dedicate a whole video just to this character. But to put it simply, he's the kind of owl bastard I both absolutely despise, but can't help but root for. It's got a well fleshed out cast of endlessly engaging characters. But more than anything else, what I think really got to me is the tragic streak that runs through the entire series. It's deeply interested in the royal politics of its setting, and the vicious level of backstabbing and betrayal it brings, where fathers are willing to kill off their own sons to ensure the right man gets the throne, and who abandon any offspring they can't consider legitimate. It's a harsh world where the cruel prosper, and the innocent and honorable are slaughtered, broken, or hardened into the kinds of people that try to do away with them in the first place. It's a world where your best friend just happens to be the person you hate least, and where death is considered the ultimate act of love. A world where the titular Vinland acts as a far-off paradise for its characters to fantasize of one day escaping to, but that no matter how close they get, always seems just out of reach no matter how hard they try. It's a world that just doesn't care, and the heart of its story revolves around the different ways its characters come to terms with that harsh reality, whether they want to or not. Vinland Saga is a tragedy in every sense of the word. Primal is an adult animated series directed by Genndy Tartakovsky and co-produced by Cartoon Network Studios and William Streets, about the unlikely friendship between a caveman and a dinosaur, as they fight to survive in a prehistoric world full of savage beasts and mythic monsters, hell-bent on tearing them limb from limb. And right from the get-go, it sets a vicious tone. It is full of violence, gore, and heart-wrenching death that makes it very clear this is a cartoon meant for an older audience. However, what really caught my attention wasn't the over-the-top bloodshed itself, but the way in which it's presented. Beyond the occasional grunt and roar, there's no dialogue in this show. It relies entirely on visuals, communicating the nuances of its narrative and characters through body language, character design, color contrast, and framing, to the point that I'd argue it'd be easy to take a screenshot out of context and still be able to understand the situation. It also means I had to pay much closer attention when watching, making for an intense visual experience I literally couldn't look away from. It's a show where the art does all the talking. But for as extreme as the series can be most of the time, the story it ends up telling is, in contrast, strangely somber. Sure, it has its lighter moments, when the caveman gets annoyed at the dinosaur taking all his kills, or the dinosaur freaking the fuck out because of a worm, and it often feels like it glorifies its copious amount of carnage, but at the same time, it's well aware of the grief such death can bring. It's hard to discuss properly without spoiling it, and personally I think this is one of those shows that is best watched blind, so I don't want to go too far into it. But what I will say is that it does a lot to explore how a world where everything is out to get you ends up taking so much from its characters, and how they cope with that loss. As easy as it is to get lost in its violent chaos, it's that solemn thematic core that I think makes this show so strong. Primal, simply put, is beautifully brutal. Los Hostos Ocultos de Frankelda, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is a stop-motion animated short directed by Roy and Arturo Ambriz and produced by Cinema Fantasma about a ghost girl called, well, Frankelda, telling spooky stories about naive kids stumbling into terrifying situations. I've always been a big fan of anthological horror stuff, especially when I was younger, when Goosebumps and grisly tales for gruesome kids were all the rage. And for me, Frankelda reaches into that same sense of macabre excitement that made those shows so fun, but with a nicer coat of paint. While the main story is a bit basic, what I love most about it is its direction. It's full of creatively striking imagery and transitions, and the designs of its characters and sets hit a nice balance between appealing and appalling, with the rough, textured nature of its stop motion giving their creepier and more grotesque details that extra touch of unnerving depth. Even something as small as how infectiously passionate Frankelda herself is for these tales of woe adds to the fun. The compositing could admittedly use some work, but there's just so many little details about this short that makes it a joy to watch. And I think there's a lot that can be done with this concept I'd love to see be explored. Frankelda is a short full of potential I hope gets a chance to become something more. Lore Olympus is a webtoon created by Rachel Smith that reimagines ancient Greek myths, specifically the taking of Persephone, in a contemporary setting, as it follows the goddess Persephone, formerly known as Kor, as after moving into Olympus to go to university, she falls headfirst into the seedy and manipulative world of the Olympian gods, and head over heels for its king of the underworld, Hades. As quite the mythology fan myself, I've always been curious about this series, and I'm glad I finally got around to it. I will admit though, a big part of that intrigue mostly revolved around its art. I just absolutely adore everything about its simple, textured, and oddly geometric style, in some ways reminiscent of the artwork of ancient Greek pottery, and how effectively it captures the epic, ethereal, and lighthearted nature of its story with stunningly colourful imagery and scenery. It's a visual feast for the eyes. But there's also an almost soap opera-like tone to its story that suits its Olympian focus oddly well. It's rife with melodrama and gossip, dramatizing the interpersonal chaos these ancient myths so often dwell on, as the personalities of its larger-than-life characters clash in over-the-top ways that make me want to pull out some popcorn and see what kind of crazy twists and turns its bickering bullshit is about to take. Oh, this is gonna be good! And what I think makes it work so well for me is that it does its best to make me care about most of its characters. They're all relatable and likable in their own way, from Hades' tendency toward isolation, to Persephone's anxieties about stepping into this new world, to Artemis' older sibling-like protectiveness of those she cares about, and more. Even the biggest assholes of the series have their moments of vulnerability, that show off the more fragile sides of their gigantic egos. Through it all, I couldn't help but root for them as they try to figure out how to do and be better, whether it means being able to stand up for themselves or looking to make amends for the mistakes they've made. There's a genuine depth to its characters I can't help but appreciate. Though, fair warning, one of the central through lines of the story revolves around sexual assault, which was a bit of a surprise, but honestly, considering Greek myths generally, I really should have seen it coming. Lore Olympus' contemporary twist on these ancient myths makes them feel more familiar and, ironically, more human. Death Stranding is an open-world action game directed by Hideo Kojima and developed by Kojima Productions. Set in what is now known as the United Cities of America after the titular Death Stranding, an event which shook the barrier between life and death, players take the role of Sam Porter Bridges, a deliveryman tasked with traversing this post-apocalyptic landscape to reconnect the country. I have to say, even though I am recommending it, this is a game I have mixed feelings about. Granted, I still haven't finished it because, Jesus Christ, it is a long game. So maybe take what I say here with a grain of salt. And moreover, there is a possibility that my opinions on it may end up changing as I get further into it. Maybe for better, maybe for worse, but still. Most of my issues with the game specifically revolve around its story. While I can appreciate what it's trying to do, with its fascinating concepts and almost theatrically presented narrative built around themes of connection and loneliness, and the many ways it can be interpreted, there's so much to it that's just difficult for me to sit through, and not in a good way. At best, it can feel clunky, and at worst, just kinda pretentious. And don't even get me started on the really fucking questionable details of the lore, because my god. That said, its gameplay is quite fun. I understand it's not the kind of thing everyone's gonna like, and admittedly, it can be fiddly at the best of times, but I just genuinely enjoy it. I've heard it described as a terrain management game, and I think that perfectly encapsulates what makes it so enthralling for me. There's so many little things I have to consider as I traverse this vast, beautifully rendered landscape. From the kinds of terrain I'll be stepping through, to the weight of the packages on my back and how they're balanced and organized, to even the way enemies seem less like combat opportunities, and more like extra environmental obstacles to work my way around. And when things do eventually go wrong, it always ends up being quite an experience. As I say, fuck it and try to kick the shit out of an entire camp of mules, or shit myself after getting a little too close to a BT without realizing it. It provides a unique mechanical challenge I haven't really experienced much anywhere else, and whose weirdly specific micromanagey bullshit is right up my alley. Hell, as much as I might complain about its length, even taking my time to wander through its environments is a pretty nice experience. It's not for everyone, but I just adore its gameplay. And ironically, I think its mechanics actually end up communicating the game's themes better than its story, through its online features. Honestly, it's something I could probably go on about all day, but to keep it short, there's an incredible sense of camaraderie that comes from being able to see other players' structures in the distance as I make my way through its world, and knowing that despite being so alone in this desolate landscape, There are plenty of people not only going through the same experience, but doing their best to help others through it. And that always encourages me to do the same, knowing that though I may never give it a second thought, that extra ladder or climbing anchor or recharge station would make the world of difference for someone else. It's honestly kind of amazing to think about, and I have to give it credit for managing to create a system that actually encourages players to try and pay it forward. For as many issues as I have with it, Death Stranding is a game I can't help but find myself constantly being drawn back to. Sayonara Wild Hearts is a music game developed by Simogo about a young woman who gets sucked into a surreal world of aesthetic to defeat a roaming band of evildoers who've stolen the harmony of the universe. Now, this game did originally come out in September, but I ended up playing the Steam version, which was released in December, so for any nitpicky pedants out there annoyed that this technically didn't come out in winter, deal with it. Anyway, I just can't get enough of everything about this game's art and music. It has such a unique look and feel, from the color palette to the designs to the crazy stages and clever settings, to the synthy bow of absolutely banging pop music it's all wrapped up in, that just hits the right spot for me. Even the game's challenges are layered with some fancy Zodiac aesthetics and riddles that kinda make it hard to figure out what they're asking you to do, but still. And its gameplay makes it easy to get lost in, lulling the player into a trance-like zen as they slide back and forth across each stage to gather crystals, hit speed boosts to get more momentum, and occasionally dip into a full-blown rhythm game full of timed button prompts, all in sync with the music. And is constantly shaking things up, throwing in new twists and mechanics to figure out all the way up to the last few levels. Its gameplay and aesthetics perfectly complement each other. Sayonara Wild Hearts is short, sweet, and simply chock full of style. And yeah, those are my thoughts. As you might have been able to tell, I decided to try and shake things up with these Top Things videos a bit. I just had some problems with the way I was doing it, because it kind of felt too rigid, messy, and in some cases a bit pointless, in that I'm mentioning a thing just because, instead of actually having something to say about it, especially in the lightning round section, so I wanted to try and see how I could deal with all that. I also, assuming nothing has gone wrong, decided to try and start premiering this series, just to experiment with that function a bit more. I am still wary of premieres, but I think they can work really well when done right, in creating that communal sense of excitement and discussion, and I thought these videos, being more loose, lighthearted, and built around just rambling and being excited about cool stuff from the last few months, would be a good series to try that with. There are still some kinks to work out, but I think the changes are working pretty well, so let me know how you feel about them. Anyway, let me know what you think, if you agree, disagree, why your top things of winter 2019 were, why you're looking forward to in the next few months, etc., and thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this and want to see more, then check out my last video, where I talk about what I think makes Ghost in the Shell feel so timeless. Or watch me discuss all the fascinating details of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse's animation and art direction. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and of course, subscribe to come fly with me. Hit the bell, stay notified, follow me on Twitter for more updates, ramblings, or poor attempts at humor, and hopefully, I'll see you later.